How's everyone doing today? How's everybody been? Hopefully good. Hopefully, good things that you had to tell me and, just wow, Mr. Angel. I've actually been putting these things to practice and I've been forming some healthy habits. I've recognized the error of my ways and I'm always constantly evolving and advancing forward with coping mechanisms, defense mechanisms, and being able to readily uh, cope with these situations in my life in a healthy and better manner than before. Obviously, that's the overall goal, that you bear fruit, that you bear more fruit, and that you're not just stuck in the same old and doing the same old, you know, virtues, commandments, blessings, integrities, and other things like that fall under the same category. But obviously, that's the overall premise of it. That's the overall premise of the gospel itself, is that you bear more fruit. Not to say that you obviously don't, you aren't stuck doing the same old things over and over again. I mean, to put it in that sense, to term it like that, but obviously that you continue just advancing and growing and maturing in wisdom and grace and, and in faith. But so yeah, this video is just basically going to be about a bunch of things, right? It's gonna have to deal with mostly, the current situations, the legalities and things that people have just admitted defeat in. And obviously, I'm saying that with the context of what I was actually referring to in the last video, how individuals just accept life for what it actually is, but they're obviously having to suffer the consequences for their pettiness, for lashing out at another individual through means like, car trouble. Their belts break, their spark plugs go out, and next thing you know, it hits somewhere that hurts, right? In their pockets, and then their money, they're just like, dang, this is just how life is, this just, obviously everybody in the secular world and over there in that way of thinking, they obviously have commonly have accepted that, you know what, I'm just gonna have car trouble sometimes, or you know what, I'm just not gonna have good phone whatever that's called, good phone service sometimes. And but realistically, these are demonic issues and these are demonic problems. And more often than not, it's not obviously it's not exclusive to just car trouble and other things like that. Obviously, it has to deal with, your overall garments, your shoes, and your clothing and everything else. As it's already mentioned in the scriptures, how the Israelites in the wilderness, right? How God was obviously telling them and reminding them that how many of you individuals is had garments that didn't, that didn't last them the whole time that I was with you. Is I did all of these things for you. I protected you from the moth and from the cankerworm and from all these other things, and yet you're over here still trying to defy me. You're still trying to rebel against me and my authority. So obviously that is hinted. It's hinted right there, right? It's implied that, God is a protector. He's the reason why all these situations end up happening, why he protects us, our garments and our mind, our and everything else, and our cars, our cell phones. And when we obviously step out of line or we deviate ourselves from Christ's path and from God's commandments, and obviously that's when, the devil comes in and he's actually able to sift us, or to obviously make us suffer the consequences for our actions and our disobedience. And many individuals are just not realistically, it's not really, uh, it's not really practiced, right? They don't really practice these types of principles that we're actually governed by in their lives. Had they actually practiced these things, most often than not, these individuals will have preserved cars, preserved. Obviously, it's not going to preserve demonic things, right? Demonic entities and corporations that obviously are pushing their own agenda, the witchcraft agenda, and all those things themselves. These things obviously have to be in context to the scriptures. He's not going to protect anything that doesn't belong to him. Same with all these clothings, and obviously little mom and mom and dad brand, whatever. These things themselves obviously are, they're small. They haven't really submitted themselves to the devil's authority for wealth, for prosperity, for fame, That way more individuals end up buying their products, and so those are more or less safer. But still, I've already seen some mom and pop brands that were, obviously promoting Satanism. They have inverted pentagrams in their things, and I can't think of it, but I'm pretty sure it has to deal with like food and chips and things like that. I mean, it's not as popular as Lay's or Oots, but or whatever is. How do you pronounce it? Is it UTZ or is it Oots or whatever it is pronounced? But still, obviously, Lay's in itself is still pretty much satanic organization. Same with Doritos, same with Fritos, everything else, right? Cheetos, everything that you obviously grew up eating. All those things themselves are 100% satanic, due to the ingredients in their ingredients of their food. And so yeah, the reasons why is that because they obviously have this ingredient, this heck, 293, and the other one I forgot what it's called, but these are basically flavoring agents that they add uh to their foods. They're like additives, I guess, or whatever, and they put these things in their foods, and it's supposed to give you the 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 flavorish, but in reality, these are like the kidney receptors of an unborn fetus, and because of that, you obviously are ingesting this, and this is able to automatically it triggers something in your mind, right? It's like it gives you the feeling of salt without you actually eating salt, and yeah, man, they just basically duplicated it. They put it in all the food, and most of these foods that you eat and you can eat that are just mainstream and everybody's aware of it, like Gatorade and other things like that, right? These things are already in those foods themselves, which is something that you need to really uh, boycott, obviously, if you're pro-life, and more or less just be able to completely dismiss and not even bother buying those brand chips and clothing. And obviously clothing in itself, the more obvious of ones that are satanic are like Guess and just big names like North Face and other things like that. Obviously, these in themselves have to deal with the spirits that are behind them, which is something that many individuals are not really able to recognize, and they're not able to equate these things in themselves. That why they actually like the things that they like, have to deal with the satanic spirits that are behind it. They're counterfeit spirits, right? They counterfeit the spirits from heaven. That way, you actually are, it's eye catching, right? The same with women jeans. All the same types of women buy the same types of jeans, right? And they all buy the same types of jeans that make them look curvier, or they make them look like this, or they make them look like that. Leggings, obviously, these things in themselves, there's like basically popular name brands of leggings that women know. I don't know. I don't wear leggings. I don't really like any girls that wear leggings or anything like that, just because of the Jezebel spirits that's behind them. That's the reasons why obviously people uh, they get attention from other guys. Is because it's like the little Jezebel spirit that is inside of them activates, and they're actually automatically they get attracted to the person who's wearing something that it's like a beacon, right? Or a lighthouse for a boat in the storm. Is essentially the principle that it is. For anybody who has the spirit of Jezebel on it, automatically to them, when they see those types of clothings or anything that's attention grabbing like that, to them that's a little beacon, and these individuals are obviously automatically captivated by it. Anybody who's a secular guy, these types of individuals are automatically just, they love it. They don't have any other moral compasses besides, I'm just a guy, and guys have to act like this, and I don't realistically have to worry, because as long as I don't punch Bob in the face when he pisses me off, because I won't go to jail, and obviously these types of principles themselves, these people are governed by. But I was talking about in the last video how that's all a lie, right? And these individuals are just willingly submitting themselves and dumbing themselves down to continue living this peaceful life, because this is obviously too overwhelming for them to be able to really apply to their lives, for them to actually be, it's reality, right? For them, many individuals are able to cope with these situations in a healthy manner. They're able to face and confront reality and just move on and to just know for certain that they're not going back to that other ways of thinking and how they obviously used to think before receiving that type of knowledge. But other people is just too much for them. And how they are able to cope with those types of situations is in short the types of results that you end up seeing. If an individual is weak-minded, they're not realistically able to, or just just not as intelligent, they'll just be stuck. They don't recognize that there's alternatives, there's options to the types of clothing that they actually wear, to the food that they eat, and the stores that they buy from. They're gonna continue buying from the same old stores and eating the same old garbage and junk and buying the same old clothes, right? But another individual is actually able to confront reality, right? They're actually able to admit the facts, and you know what? They have a little more sense in them. They're like, well, I could just go and just change, right? I could just swap out this product for another product that realistically isn't advancing or uh, promoting a satanic agenda. But still, you need to be careful about these things because you can't be naive about it, right? But so. So yeah, in the beginning, I obviously was talking about how individuals have just admitted defeat, right? They have just are willingly, submitting themselves to that type of philosophy and theology that these things are just going to happen to me in this life. Life is life, and obviously my car is going to break down eventually without failing to recognize the consequences of their actions, and they just go on living their lives however they want to live their lives recklessly, saying whatever they want about whoever they want, bullying other individuals, intimidating other people, and other things like that, realistically not recognizing the consequences that come from those actions. And had they known, obviously they would have just been like, you know what, I don't want to deal with that. I know every judgment by hand. I know why these things happen. Every judgment, why they happen in the way they do, and things like that. And I realistically don't want to get into. I don't want to add more trouble for my life as I already have been having, and they'll just let it go. Just be like, well, whatever, and that's just my life. But yeah, so basically, this is more or less just trying to detach yourself from the carnal way of thinking and really trying to view everything that happens in your life as spiritual. They have spiritual backings, spiritual reasons as to why your car breaks down, why your carburetor 6 and 4, or these types of things, your cylinders, uh, why these break, why they break down, right? And all of it has to deal with God, the Creator, and who He actually is. That way, you actually are able to recognize, you're quickened, and you remember these things themselves, and you're just like, okay, so obviously God is hearing me. He's listening to everything that I do, and He's checking me, and He's trying to see what I actually am up to and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. But still, just because individuals are not actually able to recognize that aspect and to recognize that God is always listening to their thoughts, it just goes over their heads, and they don't realistically realize the overall, how deep the message actually was for their car breaking down on whatever street, and or other things like that, right? And they don't realistically recognize how long they've had their cars for, and for them to realize that this is essentially the reasons why, because God is obviously calling them. He's calling them to repentance. He's calling them to check them, and for them to actually just knock it off and just stop. And that's something that many individuals just don't want to equate God to, that He would actually tell them those types of things where He's telling them to stop immediately. But until you obviously get like a little heart attack or a stroke, or you get into almost a car accident where you have to drive off to the shoulder and just be like, man, what just happened? And then you have to get the other individual's insurance, whatever. These things are just going to continue going over their heads, and they're not even going to bother equating what is actually happening to them and the reasons behind those things themselves. And they just live this type of lifestyle, or maybe with their bills, the type of numbers that appear in their bills, and so many other different things, right? That obviously points to the Creator for you to actually be able to recognize and reflect what type of decisions you're making inside of your life, and or maybe the body parts that were affected. I know the right side automatically that has to deal with Jesus Christ. Anything that happens to you on the right side, you could automatically look to Jesus Christ and be like, okay, that was Jesus, and he's just basically telling me that I'm taking care of you. That was me. You need to just relax and back off, and you need to just go back to your old ways and to just act how you actually acted whenever, right? You need to return to your first love, in short. And that's the reasons why some of these things happen. But they're kind of like dreams. They're kind of like dreams and interpreting dreams. That's what these things actually are. They come inside of your life. Whenever there's a suffrage or a pain or troubles or a trial or a test, automatically you need to interpret these things as if they were like dreams, and just view it from a biblical perspective, and to view them in the same exact manner as how you would try to interpret a dream, right? Automatically all these things in themselves have to deal with viewing it centered around the Bible itself. What do these things mean in the Bible? A lamb automatically points to Jesus Christ, right? A lion automatically points to the lion, the Lion of Judah, or God's wrath, or obviously everything that has to deal with lions that are written in the scriptures, right? Depending on the circumstances and the things that are happening to you in your life, the things that are afflicting you, that's obviously going to give you the best reason and the best answer as to why these things are there in your life. So obviously lamb, lions, doves, virtues, alluring, captivating, and other things like that, right? These things themselves have to deal with spiritual reasons behind it, and nothing else, right? I know for certain, and this is just something that Christ himself was telling me, when you actually are attracted to something specifically from a person, it has to deal with the virtue that's behind it. I'm not obviously talking about vanity or a person's looks or a person's beauty or things like that. I'm talking about, you obviously see the person, but it's what's behind that person that's obviously given this individual. They're being paid for their virtues, and everybody's obviously going through these same exact things themselves, where they actually are able to notice, but because they don't actually recognize these things for what they actually are, that you get paid for your rebukes and you get paid for your iniquities. Obviously that's going to cause you to gravitate towards you just noticing a person's looks without actually recognizing the spiritualness behind it. So the spirituality behind it, rather, right? So the vanity, the carnal desires, I mean, these things themselves are pretty plain and simple for people to be able to discern and to just be able to think, right? And it's not to say, and this is just essentially how things obviously work, right? This is essentially how we're governed by these principles themselves, that we don't even recognize that if we're paid if we're paid for our iniquities and for our sins through rebukes, and through these rebukes themselves, it causes us to make our beauty waste away like a moth. Then obviously, the consequences of it is the reasons why you obviously need to be able to see and notice why you actually are paid for your good virtues, your good qualities and characteristics that are inside of your heart. So read wisdom. These things are going to definitely cleanse out your vessel, your heart, your mind, your soul, your will, and your emotions, because you actually are applying some godly principles to some destructive habits, to some reckless behavior. And without you, so you obviously see there's a necessity to you actually reading wisdom, instead of you just being like, yeah, these sound pretty good and they sound like kind of suggestions, but you obviously essentially need to floor it in your life, and you really need to start applying those proverbs, those wise sayings to your life immediately and right away, because of the deliverance. The type of lifestyle that you're living prior to you actually living those things out is obviously, in short, you're damning yourself, and you don't realistically view it like that, because you don't see these sins as sins. You don't see these sins in the same exact manner as how God sees these sins, and how he judges you in general. He judges you all based on those principles themselves, whether you actually are hearkening to those types of principles and virtues and moral compasses and guidelines, or you're just like, well, whatever, these are just suggestions. Once I get to that point in my life, then I'll actually begin applying these proverbs, to where I need to be applying them to, but it doesn't realistically work like that whatsoever. You need to start applying everything and every wise saying now, and as soon as you actually read it, or you're gonna eventually just destroy your image through your own mentality and your own way of thinking. So, hopefully hopefully you're able to reflect on this when you actually notice an individual, whether they're good looking or whether they're not, or you just notice something about this person's behavior or his spirit itself, that there's virtues behind these things, as well as something that is realistically able to tell when a person is malicious, right? Or a person is bitter, or a person is jealous, or a person is angry. Some of you individuals are able to tell when a person is angry, and these things are basically easy for you to be able to recognize and see that the spirits and the virtues that are behind these people, which you are actually have noticed, is what you actually have received not received, but some of you receive attention, right? And then some of you individuals don't necessarily, you get attention for the wrong reasons, and yeah. So grace and peace be multiplied to you, and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all and reign inside of your hearts. And that in itself is just something that individuals need to be taught, and they need to ask Christ towards it for wisdom concerning that aspect in itself for their lives. And I know for certain, that there are spirits behind it. There's things, you get paid for these virtues, right? And just because of Ecclesiastes 8, it tells you that when you actually, this is more in depth on why these things are actually said the way that they're actually said. It says and the verse goes like this: when a man's reads wisdom, the countenance of his face changes. That automatically has to deal with, them actually applying these wise sayings and these scriptures to their lifestyle, and they actually are, it's embedded and rooted inside of their hearts, which ensures the deliverance aspect of things on why you actually are able to recognize and see this person's countenance change completely. This is the same principle as when individuals, before they got saved, they didn't look as good. And then prior to them actually after they got saved, they obviously, their whole countenance of their face changed. And they don't even, it's hard to be able to resemble this person from what they were before to what they are now. Well, this is the same exact principle. And for a Christian, they obviously just continue advancing and growing from that standard forward forever endeavor, right? This is just something that's for them. It's something that applies to them, and they just continue moving and advancing forward. But these things in themselves are not for you to be able to see or think of them as carnal reasons, but they're supposed to obviously be able to encourage you to deliver yourselves, to obviously, sanctify yourselves and really draw closer to God in holiness, for you to actually really be able to dwindle these numbers that are inside of your vessel, inside of your heart, your mind, your soul, your will, and your emotions, for you to be able to recognize and see that some of the ailments and some of these suffrages that are inside of your life, whether it's like cancer, terminal illness, or any of these things themselves, has to deal with a spiritual emotion, or just like a spiritual side effect, right? This is just the product of your own way of thinking and your own mentalities, and because of those things themselves, this is why you're bringing that sort of spirit of depression inside of your life, and now you're having thoughts of depression coming inside of your head, and you're thinking and you're wondering, what's wrong with me? I feel sad all of a sudden, or I feel tired all of a sudden, or I feel like this and I feel like that, or I'm tired all day, or my neck hurts, or my back hurts. And these things themselves obviously have to deal with an overall, iniquity and sin that you are abiding by and not realistically viewing as sin. And that you need to replace right away with wisdom, and just to be able to fear the Lord. That's the easiest way for you to actually be able to be delivered. You just keep these things simple. You just fear the Lord. You stop playing games. You stop playing what ifs. Like, what if this is a sin? And, you obviously just cut it out, right? For many individuals, that's the only means for them to actually be able to gain that level of discernment, or, they'll never get out of it. And they just continue scratching their heads, wondering, what is wrong with me? Why do I have these types of suffrages in my life? Is God mad at me? Or obviously, just like how I mentioned earlier, how individuals who are part of the secular life, they just have accepted this is just life. Because of life itself, automatically I have to age. Because I'm aging, I'm only getting older. So my the image of my body has to deal with the amount of years I've lived on this earth, when in reality, these things are spiritual in themselves. This isn't to be offensive or to obviously, cause individuals to feel offended, but this is the overall reasons why you obviously were taught, error. You live by these types of principles and these philosophies themselves that you were taught from the secular world and from school and from and other places like that, and because of those things themselves, you obviously are, you could easily detach yourself from those ways of thinking and really hearken and really live by those godly principles, and just to fear the Lord. And obviously, just like how it's written in Proverbs 3, right? If you actually end up fearing the Lord, then your health is going to flourish, and these things are automatically just set in stone, right? These are automatic laws and automatic blessings for anyone who obviously decides to take these things serious and really reconcile themselves, their lives, their thoughts, their hearts, and their minds, their souls, their will, and their emotions back to God, which is the overall premise of this itself. But that's why I was mentioning why that obviously the whole being captivated by another individuals is whatever their virtues or their spirits behind them has to deal with, the actual virtue and the spiritual side of things, and not at all viewing those things themselves, carnally, right? You're just like, wow, this person's so pretty, or wow, this person's like this, or wow, this person's like that. These things themselves are obviously inherited. You inherit good virtues and principles from your parents in the same exact manner as how you inherit, iniquities and sins of the fathers, ancestral sins, generational curses. All these things themselves get inherited down to you. So these things are a lot more serious than many individuals would like to admit, as you're able to tell if you actually have some of these curses and the reasons why you have that type of curse, right? And for the person who actually knows, or rather the angels, right? These individuals obviously know the reasons why. They know the judgments that come inside of your family trees for the types of behaviors and ways of thinking that afflict a man, and they obviously affect a man as well. And people obviously get very these things take different forms, right? It doesn't specifically have to deal with just looks. Obviously, it has to deal with lameness, whether an individual actually is able to walk. They're born lame, they're born deaf, they're born blind, they're born this and they're born that. These birth defects themselves have to deal with automatically the sins of the fathers, right? And some of these things themselves, just how Christ was talking about, he said, who sinned, his mother or his father? And these things is like neither mother nor father, but it's for the Son of Man to be glorified. Some of these things are just for reasons of their own, right? Nobody can realistically know for certain why, but for the most part, obviously the main reasons why these situations happen to a person is because they were tempted, right? They fell into sin. That brought the legality in for the devil to actually begin affecting these types of people. And in even in the secular world, right, they obviously already have commonly attributed these things to, obviously this is more of a mature type of topic in itself, like the sperm count and the types of sperm that you have, whether it's like healthy sperm or a type of sperm. But these things themselves have to do with genetics, what type of genetics you actually have. So if you have good genetics or you have bad genetics, you have things that your children are going to be more susceptible to and more prone to actually have, like Down syndrome and so many other different things, right? Depression, even being born gay. These things themselves all have to deal with hereditary, right? And some of these individuals truly have to pay for the sins of their fathers through just genetics. They're just born, I don't want to say they're born gay, but they obviously are born with that ability and capability to be more susceptible to those types of spirits themselves. And because the devils, they obviously know what's up, right? They already know that the secular lie is all a lie in itself, and they don't really advance it unless it has to deal with another person who doesn't actually believe what I'm saying is true. So they already know secular lie is a lie. They already have a network, and they have an order of how to be able to tell what individual is more susceptible to these things and what individual isn't, right? And these things just begin to affect a person. And In carnal terms, they obviously say these are chemical imbalances of the mind, but realistically, those are physical manifestations of a devil that is inside of your head. You could cast those things out like nothing if you have spiritual authority or whether you just believe. And those things themselves are actually able for you to actually be able to recognize what these things actually are and everything that is inside of your body, what these situations actually are, and they're not carnal. All these things are spiritual. It's not like what your doctor says, I have to take medicine and pills. While yes, obviously these things can help and they do help, headaches and pain relievers and other things like that. It doesn't take away from anything that I obviously have mentioned in this video. Everything that I'm saying is obviously true, and these ailments and these suffrages that man obviously is afflicted by and is constantly going through all has to deal with the iniquities and the sins of an individual themselves. A good tree bears good fruit, and that's obviously commonly seen uh, all across the earth, right? We're actually able to see if a person is a good person based on the type of parents they had, or these things are pretty evident. Everybody has pretty much common ground on that in itself, that we're actually able to tell what kind of kids these people are just by the parents, right? I know my parents taught me what a lot of virtues and a lot of good qualities and characteristics that I still hold on to and I still practice on a daily basis. I'm polite, neighborly. These things themselves are obviously just attributes and qualities that my parents just taught me to be like. They taught me to just be this and that. Don't be rude. Don't be whatever. Listen to your mom. Listen to your dad, and just do things like that. And these things themselves are actually able for you to be taught that a good tree bears good fruit, right? And your parents are those trees, and you're the fruit. And the bad tree, so like the bad parents, the careless parents, the corrupted parents that were obviously, they started off from bad seeds, right? They produce bad fruit, and we see these bad little kids all the time, and they're always on Instagram, they're always on this, they're always on that, just obviously just bad kids. And it doesn't necessarily have to be because of the parents' sins, but definitely because of the parents' carelessness. That is the reason why these kids just end up showing up on Instagram and wherever else, as well as just environment. These things themselves, all these things just play a part, right? So I'm not gonna say it's exclusive to just trees. Obviously, it has to deal with the overall environment and the conditions that cause this individual to stray away from the truth, and to stray away from the light and from God's path and His true ways. And obviously that's just basically pretty much common ground, right? Everybody has acknowledged that, even in our lifestyle, in our society. I know growing up, yeah, it's like, oh, that kid is like very sheltered. You already know his parents are strict, or those types of things, right? And his parents don't let him do anything, and those are more or less the things that I obviously would prefer, right? An individual that while they were growing up, their parents were strict and they actually abided by those rules themselves, and an individual who just snuck out and did whatever they wanted in all types of hours of the night. So that's obviously, this again common ground. Everybody's like, well, I'd rather be with the girl who was strict and who just stayed inside of her house than the girl who was just wild and rambunctious, and she just did whatever her heart told her to do. And she's a thought, she's this, she's a whore, and whatever. Her life changed dramatically, and now she got saved by the Lord. You can't be judgmental, right? But overall, what are people going to gravitate towards? The girl, right? The girl who stayed inside and she was disciplined, whatever, or she just didn't have enough guts to actually be able to rebel against her parents or her mother, and whatever. But so yeah, so I'm gonna break any of these genetic curses, because these are, in short, just ancestral sins and generational curses that we actually are affected by. So I'm breaking these things up and I'm casting those things out. Automatically, these things aren't gonna happen overnight, but because these were practices that you were practicing from a young age, or maybe not, obviously these things are gonna take a little bit more time. The generational curses, excuse me, for you to actually be able to recognize and know for certain that everything and anything that is bad or any types of sins, these things themselves are inherited, is through the curse of death. What is the automatic penalty that every man has to suffer for because of sin? Everything on the face of the earth has to suffer death, all because of one transgression, because of one sin. Through that act of transgression, through that act of sin, that is in short how we actually inherited death itself. So the key word that you need to look for right there is inherited. What ended up happening after an act of disobedience and an act of rebellion, you inherited the sin that obviously was committed by your ancestors. So every one of these sins that you commit, automatically these things just get passed on to your family tree, right? And these things just begin affecting your further generations. Even whatever types of sin that you committed, whatever types of sins that you committed from now on until you actually have your first child or your second child or whatever, all these things just add up. And if you aren't actually in the deliverance ministry to be able to, break these curses up and cast them out, then they're going to continue affecting and messing with your children, your future offspring, and even your current offspring who actually were born before you committed any of those sins. And yes, these are things. So these are things to obviously watch out for, right? These aren't very nonchalant things that you just like, whatever. I already have a good moral compass, integrity. I don't have to worry about these things. Obviously, there's severe consequences for your acts of pettiness, besides just them affecting your car, right? These judgments take different forms, and many people are just not even willing to admit these things. And they're just like, well, whatever, I just do this, I just do that. This is just part of life, this is just part of life again. I don't know why you did this to me, God, why you gave me a child that can't walk, that was born lame, that was born deaf, that couldn't do this, that couldn't do that. And this is in short the reasons why, just off the same exact, the only basis on this is the fact that once Eve committed the sin, automatically that was passed down to us. And now we actually have to suffer the consequences for that through death, correct? Nobody can escape that. And everybody has his own little way of thinking and means of living in denial to deny that fact in itself. But prior to Eve's rebellion or whatever, before the fall of man, there was no death, there was no corruption on the face of this earth. Nothing died, not even the animals, not even the trees, the grass, or anything for that matter, right? It was just, everything was in harmony and the exact same as it was like in heaven. And it wasn't until then that obviously the earth was cursed and everybody has to suffer the same exact fate and the same exact curse of death. So knock it off, stop committing these unnecessary sins of whatever, of lust, of complaining, murmuring, and negative thoughts, thinking such a negative way of thinking for another individual, because these, in short, are obviously a lot more severe. These penalties are a lot more, you have to suffer for these consequences, and it's not as easy as whatever, I'll just ask Christ to forgive me. These things are curses, man. You've cursed your children through your actions and through your carelessness, and you don't even realize it. You don't even recognize this is the exact reason why some of your kids have cancer, why they're affected by cancer, why they're more susceptible to those spirits of sodomy and those gay spirits, those homosexual spirits, and those lesbian spirits. It all has to do with your own careless tongue and how you obviously have carried yourselves in this lifetime. And I know, man, I know everybody wants to shelter themselves in this cocoon and this way of thinking that, I don't want to believe this. If I don't believe this, then, my kids won't be affected. But you realistically, you're going to be judged by that standard from now on. So you're going to have to man up, in all honesty. You're really going to have to be and hold yourselves accountable to from your actions from now until then, right? I know some people just don't care. They'll continue acting this way just so they're able to hurt their future children. But obviously, because of that, because God knows those things themselves, these kids get more graces because of your own carelessness and because of your hatred towards your actual, your seed or your generations. Some of you wouldn't even be able to bear children just because of that. And God is going to curse you, and He's obviously going to cut that tree off at the root, and that's it for that family tree, and it ends at you, and that's essentially it, but whatever. these people just don't care either way. But that was just, I had to say that, just because individuals really are stupid, they'll continue just acting like that, being careless and saying whatever they want and doing whatever they want, without, just so they could obviously hurt and harm their future children, or really failing and neglecting, uh, really failing and neglecting, uh, that God already knows, right? He's rational. He obviously could just give this individual more graces, just completely cause you to fail in your motives and your intents. And obviously, nobody's going to be affected by those things. Like, you think the millennium is right around the corner, those things are going to be whatever. The curse of death and all these things themselves are not going to affect any of those children that are born, or any of those children that are in the millennium. So you're not realistically doing anything. I know you want to make it seem like you are this great, I know how to, beat the system. I know how to get these individuals in trouble, how to get my future children into trouble with God. I just got to do this. I just got to act like that. But realistically, just cut it out. You're going to affect yourself more than you think, and you're going to end up dying and not even bother having any children to be able to do these plans to. And obviously, that's pretty funny in itself for them. But, they're just fools, and they think of God as incarnately, right, through carnal understandings and knowledge. God is God, and God is so good. He's not going to punish me for any of these things. And, obviously there's just been so many examples, right, that I've actually been able to see and notice how God is forward with the type of people that are forward, right? These are written in the scriptures in Psalms 18. So with the pure, he's pure. With the forward and the types of individuals that are like that, like how I just mentioned, he's like that with them back. And I mean, that's pretty sad, for people that realistically had this naive image of God and what they actually thought he was to be. This complete lie. He's judge, and based on how you actually have treated other people, he's obviously going to treat you as well. So just cut it out and knock it off. You can't win any game. You can't win any games with him, and that's something that you realistically really need to evaluate your lives in, your ways of thinking and your mindsets and mentalities, that he's acting like that with you, just how you're acting with other individuals. And it seems convenient, that your life is the way that it is, and you don't have to suffer the consequences for how you live and what you actually do to another person, whether you bully or intimidate whoever. Obviously things go, everything comes back around, right? And you're gonna have to end up suffering, and these things are just planned the way that they're actually planned. And you're gonna need help one day, and God's not going to help you out. And there's some things that you need to keep in mind, right, while you're walking here on the face of this earth, is that right now you have a good run, you're doing this, you don't need help from nobody, you have a good job, you have a car, you have this and you have that. But there's going to come a time in your life where you obviously are going to need help from God, where you're going to be poor or homeless. And what are you going to do? You're going to have cancer, you're going to have COVID. Next thing you know, you can't even breathe. They got you flipped on your belly, and you just you can't breathe or do anything like that. And sadly, people are just bitter, right? They'll just continue just being angry and infuriated with God, and cursing him and doing all these types of things. But they're just adding judgments upon judgments for their actions, and they're making their eternities 10 times worse than if they would have just kept their mouth shut and just would have waited patiently for God. And obviously, what does God get? He obviously gets to do all the type of evil that he's been wanting to do to the type of person who was just living that type of reckless and evil lifestyle. They were essentially just letting themselves be puppeteered by the devils that were coming inside of their life to tempt them, to make it make sense to them, that what they actually are doing is somehow going to hurt the Creator, is somehow going to hurt God or another person, or other things like that, right? And in reality, these things only, in the end, they only affected them, and that's it, right? Everything else is already case closed. Everything else is closed. The books are closed, and it's just you and your thoughts, and you and your carelessness, and you and your own irrational way of thinking, right? That you really and genuinely thought was going to affect the person you were trying to hurt. In reality, it didn't even matter. It doesn't make a difference whatsoever, except to you, right? And that's the only person you ended up affecting for the long run. And obviously that's scary in itself. Many individuals still want to not even let that type of fear take hold of them, because they want to have that sense of control inside of their lives. And it's pretty sad, these types of individuals are just examples and little zoo animals that everyone's able to learn from to never repeat those types of mistakes that they obviously have committed in their lives. You know, they're examples, and I mean, there's not realistically anything that you could do about it. You can't save them or anything like that. Right now is the time for you to obviously be able to help them out to ensure that these individuals don't commit the same mistakes and they don't go living the same old lifestyle without repenting, without actually, uh, turning a 180 and just completely just stopping all of uh, their fruitless deeds and their destructive deeds that they're obviously destroying themselves. And uh obviously there's still hope right now, but still many of these individuals are not going to want to, they don't want to change their minds about their lifestyles. And the overall premise of this video in itself is obviously for you to be able to recognize and see that there are consequences for your actions. Not to say that you're going to make an example out of another individual, or that God's making examples of these people through their actions and through their acts of disobedience, through the judgments that come inside of their lives. That sadly is not going to happen. They think that they could avert it or they can manipulate these judgments, when in reality these things are just, unstoppable. It's like a train going full speed ahead and you're right there on the tracks and you're just doing whatever you want. You're mocking the train, you're sticking your tongue out, you're doing all types of things. And obviously what is going to happen, you're solidly right there on the train tracks and you can't get out at any time whatsoever. And you think that somehow you're affecting that train and its emotions, when in reality it's just going to come, it's going to just destroy you and annihilate you, and blood's going to be everywhere. So realistically, that's essentially the exact premise and principle that is going on inside of your life. You're sitting here mocking a train, and an emotionless train, and you think that you're hurting it in some way, shape, or form. That's just not happening. So you need to knock it off, relax, really view your life, and you know the types of things that you like, right? You know what you don't like, what you do like, and just reflect on those things themselves, for you to really encourage yourselves to not go back to the same types of lifestyles that were destroying you and that were causing you to just mock an emotionless train. It's just through your own ways of thinking, you try to rationalize these things. You try to make it make sense to you that, you're doing something productive with your life. At least you did this, and, you're lashing out with this individual. You're making this person pay for whatever type of emotions that you feel like they're responsible for. But in reality, everybody's responsible for their own actions, and you're responsible for your own actions as well. You can't make another person suffer for your mishaps and your own pettiness and your own mockings. And obviously another person's not going to suffer for your own stupidity and your own foolish way of thinking, right? So this is obviously, for you to realistically recognize and see that you need to really mature, and you really need to grow out of that phase in that little way of thinking, because you're only destroying yourselves. People are not as bad as you would like to think. I know there's bad people on the face of this earth. Everybody knows that, but typically everybody wants the best for you, and you want to just limit it to, you want to limit the people to just the types of people that have come inside of your life. But in reality, heaven is full of non-judgmental people that won't make you feel guilty, people that will not hold you to that condemnation that you hold yourselves to those accusations, to your past, or any of those things themselves. I mean, that's essentially what Christ actually is. He's not going to hold you, he's obviously going to hold you accountable while you're here on the face of this earth. But that that guiltiness, that guilty conscience, that guilt that you hold on to, what else? Feeling condemned, feeling this, feeling that. Those things in themselves automatically, that's not what heaven is like. Well, yes, you're going to remember everything that you did in this life and everything you said. Christ is not going to make you feel guilty for any of those things themselves, because of the quality and characteristic of what that actually is good, right? These things automatically belong to Christ. While there are certain circumstances where, he can easily just remind you of just to shut up and do things like that. I remember your life while you're walking on the face of this earth. You did whatever you wanted to do. You walked how you pleased, and you did this and you did that. I mean, yes, obviously, these things you're actually able to remember and know for certain that you actually did do these things while you're walking here on earth. But Christ, obviously, it will still be on Christ's judgment to be able to, to just bring it up before you, and that's not something that you realistically want to do. I know I went to heaven, right? I went to heaven, and he obviously, they were just accusing me. Did I do this? Yes. Did I do that? Yes. Did I do this? Yes. And I just kept telling them yes because I was being accused, and somehow, I already knew that these things were true, right? These were accusations that automatically, I was guilty for, and guilty of. And so I wasn't realistically, just, yeah, and I wasn't realistically like, I'm gonna deny it or had any emotions to or any intentions to actually deny any of these things themselves, even though I had the feeling of hell itself and how horrifying and the terror that obviously accompanied the whole place. Uh, this environment, the whole environment itself is scary, but I was not personally scared. That's what people need to understand, that the environment in itself is scary. You being placed there will automatically be afraid, but you not being in hell, obviously, it's not that scary. You're right before Christ, and the only thing that realistically that you're dealing with in that moment is just the accusations that they're hitting you with. Did you do this? Yes, obviously I did it all, and not to really say it in those types of tones either, because, excuse me, you're obviously in front of Christ, and those things themselves will not fly with him. He is holy. He is God. He is the creator. Obviously, you have this type of knowledge for you to be able to treat an elderly person or somebody who's older from your family or just strangers to a certain respect and to a certain reverence, I would say, quote unquote. But obviously, Christ is the same exact way. You already know how to treat individuals that are of that age, and for you to just continue just, relaxing and this is my friend, this is my homie, with an individual that you personally have never met, you've just heard things from, but it be airness on your end, right? Obviously, if Christ brings you to that place, or he obviously makes jokes with you, or other things like that in heaven, or, I'll just say that, just to be able to, dismiss anything and everything that is directly in contrary to that, and directly in contrary to treating him with respect and the type of reverence that he deserves and he has. And then obviously you could just dismiss those things themselves. Those things should not hold any water whatsoever in your life, or you should not entertain those thoughts themselves about who Christ actually is. You should just be like, well, respect, this personal relationship with Christ, my buddy, my friend, my beloved. Beloved obviously is like, yeah, but he already knows if you actually truly love him, or you're just saying that for you to actually be enveloped in your own emotions and how it makes you feel when you actually say those things themselves. Obviously, words are a lot different than actions, and you really need to make sure that your actions are reflecting your words, or there's no point. You're over here just worshiping. You don't want to engage in spiritual warfare. He's just going to tell you to cut it out and fight. And no, honestly, that's pretty sad. People don't want to believe that. They're just like, no, he honestly would tell me that he wants me to tell him that I love him. It's like, but in reality, do you really love him, or are you, what do you love more? Do you love your life more? Do you love him more? And obviously, that's what he's gonna hold you to. And the type of judgments that come inside of your life are due in part because of that. And obviously, there's a whole bunch of other things. Your unwillingness to want to obey God more, your unwillingness to want to obey the law of Moses, these things themselves are just going to cripple and destroy your walk with Christ. And obviously these things just show you how narrow the path actually is, and it's not as easy as, this great revival attempts to make it seem, right? Everybody can just get saved because it's by grace through faith, when in reality, there's a lot that Christ himself demands from you. He wants you to count the cost. He wants you to really, apply these types of principles to your life, and to obviously be able to, to not kid yourselves either, to not, deceive yourselves and act like these things are not still the same exact way as they've always been, as they've been in the first century church. Because I know for a certain, most of you individuals, if you're actually able to, really place yourselves in those types of circumstances, as a first century church, most of you would even not even bother calling yourselves Christians anymore, because you already know that you don't live up to those standards, to the same types of requirements that Christ himself already demands from you in this day and age. And it's pretty sad, that even putting it in those terms, people are actually able to finally recognize and see. But then it's even sadder that these people are not going to bother actually, changing and maturing and growing, and they're just going to obviously be self-satisfied and complacent. They're going to make all types of excuses. Well, this is now, that was then. And realistically, that in itself, just it was so much life for them to be able to recognize that their lifestyles and the types of lives that they're living right now does not, it doesn't reflect any of those types of individuals in the first century, right? While when the church was actually created and made, when Christ, ascended to heaven. And yeah, these things are pretty they're simple, right? I know these things are really that simple for you to understand, and the type of nature of what these things actually are. But still, just because of individuals is means for them to actually be able to make excuses, and how reasonable these things actually are. They're going to continue just living the same exact life. They're going to hear this message. They're going to be like, wow, this is so inspirational. Yeah, man, I needed to hear this type of message. But then excuses come that appeal to their logic, and excuses come that appeal to their own reasonings, and their own what is rational to them, what just naturally makes sense to them, right? uh and they just never bother growing out of that type of phase, or that type of lifestyle that they obviously have recognized is damning them. And these things are I need to apply these things to where I need to apply them to, right? I'm not going to be able to just be dumb about it, and just be like, well, whatever, it is what it is. I live my type of lifestyle that I live, and because of that, I'm perfect. And what, it's not even that I'm perfect or things like that. There's obviously always room for you to grow. You're not bound by the same type of means for you to actually be able to cope with these situations that come inside of your life. You obviously are constantly growing and evolving. I'm just gonna say evolving, just because it's actually easy for you to be able to recognize that you're obviously always moving forward, and you're not just stuck or limited by any of those ways themselves. You think God is stuck by his own wisdom or his own virtues or his own qualities? No, obviously he's infinite in those things themselves, that he's actually able to, make a perfect judgment, and he's still able to execute his own characteristics and qualities at the same exact time. Forwardness, obviously, how you act is obviously how you're going to get God back, right? You're obviously going to get the same type of treatment that you've been treating another individual back to your life, in whatever form it comes in. So definitely look at your life right now, because the type of lifestyle that you're living right now definitely reflects how you actually have been treating other people, and God is treating you the same exact way. Maybe you're homeless. These things themselves have to deal with generational curses, and sins of the fathers, and so many other different things that you realistically really need to investigate these things. Or maybe you like being homeless. I know I didn't like being homeless, but for sure, just because I didn't like it, I definitely did everything I could to ensure I would not stay homeless. Sometimes I do slack. Sometimes I do this, but for the most part, I have to work, right? I know what that lifestyle is like, to wake up and still be smelly, and and wear 10-day-old socks, and having to change in the bathroom, and it's just pretty bad. 10-day-olds doesn't sound that bad, or because other people have had it worse, but those things are pretty bad in themselves, especially if it's your first time being homeless. And then you get like these little what is it, if your feet get wet, your skin starts peeling off, and all these things like trench foot or whatever, gangrene, and so many other different things, right? These things are obviously very real, and you go into this homeless lifestyle without you actually recognizing that these things are going to happen to you. And it just sucks, and it gets really bad, and then you have to walk with these same scars all the time. they're like trying to heal, but your feet are constantly wet because they're sweaty. And these things, it's pretty bad, especially if you're very inexperienced with you being homeless. And yeah, definitely that's one of the things that I used to do when I first started giving these individuals care packages. I obviously had their feet in mind just because I used to walk all the time, and when I was homeless. And socks, t-shirts, deodorant, pen and paper. I mean, these things are like little commodities that you don't realize that you actually need. You never know when you're going to come into contact with somebody who wants to give you a job while you're homeless and you don't have anything. You don't even have a phone, and or just other things, right? These are just things to keep in mind. Uh, $5 just because they're actually able to buy, like medication pills from the Dollar Tree. I used to give them like things for their headaches and pain relievers just because I already know that, my feet used to hurt a lot from walking all the time, being homeless. Excuse me. And yeah, a razor. I mean, not that much, honestly. Uh, but yeah, I mean, that's that aspect of things. So I asked the Holy Ghost what else he wanted me to talk about. He basically said to still be talking about the virtues that accompany the you noticing the characteristics, right? Their traits, what they actually look like, and these things themselves. All of it has to do with grace, right? And this is in short what the Holy Ghost actually is. The Holy Ghost is the reason why you're able to obey Christ. It is Him that wills out Christ's will for your life, just like I was written in Philippians. So all these things in themselves, that's why you obviously regenerate, right? You obey Christ, you do all the commandments that He tells you to do, you obey wisdom or anything that obviously has to deal with spirit, because you walk in the spirit and you don't walk in the flesh. That's why you obey wisdom, but you realistically don't view it as commandments, you just view them as suggestions. And you do all these things themselves that have to deal with just godly principles and biblical and scriptural principles. And you listen to the Psalms, you read Samuel, you read Kings, and you read so many other different books in the Old Testament for you to be able to gain this type of knowledge and understanding of who God actually is. And obviously you copy the good, you don't imitate the bad, you love your enemies, and and you do things like that. And these things themselves are actually able to teach you, and you generally and genuinely gravitate towards these things as a baby Christian, right? I don't know why that sounded weird, but as a baby Christian, automatically you're actually able to understand that, you're able to recognize that was you at some point. You automatically did everything that was in the scriptures because it was a part of the Bible, and you knew it was the Holy Ghost. And that was the only reason why you ever did any of those things. But now you obviously you've been walking with Christ, right? And now you get complacent, you get self-satisfied, you get nonchalant about these things, and you stop worrying about these little, acts of discernment. You know what? It's fine for me not to do it this time. And obviously, compromise by compromise, little by little, you just go back to this little image that is what you were prior to you actually being saved, or prior to you actually practicing those virtues and acts of wisdom as you're just getting older, right? You're getting more mature. You're maturing as you're getting older, right? Maybe you're a teenager, and then you just get older. I know for certain, obviously, I used to be a teenager, right? Who just didn't abide. Wow. I didn't abide by those principles that many individuals were abiding by, being followers, and just copying every one of these trends that everybody copied. And I was more or less just, I was bent on not being a follower and doing everything that everybody did for whatever type of circumstance or whatever. I obviously wanted to be a leader, or maybe not a leader, but definitely not a follower. I definitely wanted to be my own person and just do whatever I wanted. But yeah, still many individuals live under this follower way of thinking, 25, 35, and they obviously do everything for the praises of men. They do these things to be able to please their peers, their friends, and they got everybody laughing at work when they make fun of another person, and everybody's just but all these people obviously get judged for those types of actions and those types of sins. Same with the Instagram comments. All the types of individuals who automatically bash an individual who is innocent or isn't innocent, they all have to suffer for it in the same exact manner as whatever environment or situation or circumstance, whatever it has to be, right? In the same exact manner, and yeah, it's sad. People are naive, and because of their own naivety, they destroy their lives. Wise words. I mean, it was a simple sentence, right? But still, had you known, the type of consequences you would have to suffer for your actions, I doubt any of you would actually have done any of those things. I mean, if you realistically really knew why you had so much car trouble or why you couldn't hold a job, and it was because of you being a petty person or you doing petty things to everyone and anyone, would you cut it out, honestly? I mean, you're going broke, right? And you knew for certain that the reason why this happened the way it happened and why your car broke down in I-59 or I-95 or whatever was because of your little irrational thought that you had about a person. Just knock it off. I should be able to teach you, that these things are very, it doesn't matter how big or how small you view them, you still get judged for them. In the same exact manner as how God wants to judge you for them. He's judged, and you can't escape any of it itself. Some of these things are funny, especially being in those circumstances as well. And then looking back, and it's like, wow, these things were obvious. God was obviously calling me in those times and in those situations for me to actually be able to knock it off and for me to just cut it out. But sadly, I didn't even want to listen. Even in the type of liquor and the type of drinks that you drink, God is still calling you, and your likes and dislikes. You don't like Fireball? Well, me neither. There's a little demon on it. I wonder why. And God is calling you in those things. Make sure you don't like demons and you apply that principle to what you should and what you need to. Because there are some very destructive habits that are clearly 100% demonic and they're ruining your life. Excuse me. So yeah, obviously, I'm going to ask Jesus Christ what he wants to say. He's going to loop back to the eternal characters. These things are just means for you to be able to prepare for these situations, for you not to act out on those impulses or on those destructive habits, and to really just pause, take 5 seconds and really breathe it out, for you to actually be able to ensure that you don't repeat the same old mistakes. You practice, you prepare, you read the scriptures, you remember, you try to remember the type of advice that your parents gave you for those types of situations and those types of whatever those issues, and you really live by it and you really apply those things to your life, because that is in short what is going to perfect your eternal character. So first, we got that out of the way, right? The types of situations that do happen to man, and now because there's an ability, now you're actually fully able to be able to ensure that you don't repeat the same old mistakes. Sorry, I just put the cough. That you don't repeat the same old mistakes, and now you have every means to be able to ensure that you don't repeat those same old mistakes, and you actually are able to do something about those destructive habits ahead of time, right? Before you actually end up, committing a mistake or doing something in your life that You're going to regret the consequences for it. You're absolutely going to hate it. You're going to despise yourself for the types of judgments that God is going to afflict your life with. And yeah, so really ponder it, really think it through, especially because you have every means to be able to pass these tests when they actually do happen, instead of you just constantly and habitually just thinking you got it like that. And these situations are gonna come in your life. You're gonna ace, wow, you're gonna ace this test, right? You're gonna do this and you're gonna do that, and then these tests end up happening. What do? Your first instinct, your first impulse, whatever you are accustomed to actually doing without thinking, that isn't sure what you actually are going to do. I don't know why. You obviously aren't really, you haven't really taught yourself any or any healthy coping mechanisms. You're just accustomed to actually, coping with those situations in the same exact manner. You've just been the same exact person as you've always been, and you're going to continue being the same exact person. And I mean, there's not realistically anything that you could do about it if you don't want to change, right? You're not going to bother listening to this message. You're not going to bother doing anything of this sort, right? You're just going to be like, well, whatever, I am who I am. But for the people who actually want to change, and the people who don't want to repeat the same old mistakes because of the consequences that come from it, they affect your children, they affect your cars, your wallet, and these things are inescapable. Obviously, you have every means to be able to prepare for these situations and circumstances from destroying your lives in the future. You obviously can't do anything about the situations that have already happened, right? These types of judgments are obviously, whatever. All you could do is realistically, bless God, thank God, and, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. There's not really much that you could do about it, but now you have every means for you to actually be able to, never repeat those same exact mistakes that you obviously have always repeated. Go and sin no more, the same exact principle, and yeah, just live by it. Recognize that you could do everything to stop those future consequences, like burning in the lake of fire, from happening. And really know and really know for certain that all this is going to be all in your own responsibility, and you're going to be accountable for any of those types of rejections, or actually accepting that you need to change, and you actually changing, right? You actually preparing for those for you obviously always fall into. And that's pretty sad. You always fall into these same exact situations, and you get yourselves into so much trouble. I could talk about the church and what they commonly fall into, right? Lust, being petty, laughing at a joke they shouldn't laugh at, and things like that. But I could also talk about, the secular world, being petty, cursing, fighting, felony assault, making fun of people and whatever. These things in themselves are just whatever. All these issues just are avoidable from this point on, based on your own diligence and your own efforts. But because you actually can prepare, you obviously are able to know and learn some new healthy coping mechanisms that are going to help you mature and help you grow in grace and in wisdom. Wise sayings, the teachings of Christ. You're loving your enemies. You're blessing those that curse you. You're obviously, being a Christian. You're applying these teachings of Christ and commandments of Christ with the authority that He gave you. These commandments. And you're not at all, just being like, well, Sarah really got me mad that time, and because she got me mad, the Lord understands that, I'm working this out in faith, and, I love Sarah, but, Sarah, just cut it out, knock it off. Some of these issues are realistically not as severe or as serious as these devils are attempting to make it seem. They're just coming inside of your life to, make you overreact and cause you to overthink on, man, this person did this and everybody saw it. They're probably going to think everybody forgot about it, in all honesty, and it's pretty sad. that you don't recognize those things themselves, for you to actually be able to see, that people are not like the type of people that you think, or maybe not like you, right? And that maybe that's good for someone else, that not everybody is like you, because you're really petty and you're really like this and you're really like that. You don't take anything from anyone. But realistically, the tables always can turn, right? And then what's going to happen? You're going to wish you never did any of those things, and the other person's just going to laugh. So cut it out, knock it off, change, repent, think these things through, really think about a more excellent way, in a more, refined way. I know you've been doing the same old things over and over again, but these things get old, right? And you really need to branch out and bear more fruit of the same type of behaviors and the same type of situations that you're obviously always getting into. You need to mix it up a little bit and really apply these things to your lives. That way you're not so bound by the same old habits and the same old, coping mechanisms that you obviously are always using and always attracted to, I guess. I don't know. But just don't be dumb, right? You obviously constantly have to grow. You constantly have to be always thinking of a more excellent way, how you obviously could just be more and more Christ-like, and not be so centered on yourself, be so self-satisfied, and be like, well, this is me, I haven't really fallen into that. I haven't really fallen into that sin of not loving my enemies. I love everyone, and or I always bless those that curse me, and and I haven't had any trouble with that. You realistically need to apply more commandments to the same exact treatments that you're getting. You need to be like angels, in all honesty. You realistically really need to sincerely and genuinely wish the best for everyone and anyone, regardless of what they have done to you or what they have done to another individual. Especially, I know people hear these messages, but I know these things get really tough, right? Somehow the carnal individuals always get stirred up, and they hear people getting molested or little kids getting molested, and they're just like, no, I can't forgive these types of people, and God is going to avenge these little ones. And realistically, you don't have to get into those types of things in themselves. You automatically have to wish these people the very best, regardless of what they have done in their lifestyle. And you have to, genuinely, coming from the bottom of your heart, really desire and really wish the very best for these people, because that is essentially what God requires from you. He doesn't at all want you saying any of those things themselves. He doesn't want you at all saying that, oh, when Christ comes back, your blood is going to stain my shirts. None of that stuff. All of these things and all of these events and situations and stories that you'll hear, all of these things uh, have to be able to mold your internal character, to be able to maximize it, and you're able to reap the benefits from anything and everything that you obviously hear in this lifetime. So none of that, just cut it out. God does not think there's some sort of merit from it on your end. There's obviously more merit to the side of you actually, genuinely from the bottom of your heart, wishing the very best for these people, regardless of what they are, regardless of the affiliation, whether they're Satanists, witches, or, maybe they're just deceived, right? And they just voluntarily, molest children because they genuinely like it. They're not realistically Satanists or witches or any of those things, but, they're pedophiles, whatever is cool, is good. Obviously, you're able to prevent those situations from actually happening before they happen, because it hasn't happened. And, obviously, God hears your prayers. You can send angels, legions of warring angels, to be able to prevent, to be able to get this little kid to snitch on the pedophile, to be able to, obviously get the right person at the right time, to be able to prevent it and stop it entirely, and those things in themselves. But, these things obviously still have to be with your own heart uh, intense in mind. So you obviously have to be automatically intending for the very best for these individuals, regardless of whatever they have done inside of their lives, whatever they have done to me, to Christ, whoever. Obviously, these things in themselves have to happen, how they're written, and that's essentially it. Obviously, what Christ told Peter, the Lord rebuke you. You suffer the things of men and not the things of God. Obviously, everybody wants to get on that little high horse and be like, you know what, Lord, I feel like crying because I wish that I could have stopped you from actually, obviously, these things had to be done, He already knows what you actually feel and what you genuinely feel, but, these things obviously have to be set in stone. There's nothing that you could do about it, and they're just a part of God's perfect plan of salvation, and these things in themselves are just whatever. Let it go, and still be focused and centered on your eternal character, doing the right thing, not realistically caring, or letting that kind of stuff bother you or get to your head. Right, you're still automatically still revolved around your eternal character, ensuring anything and everything that you do is Christ related and Christ centered. Right, so obviously God is judge, Christ is God, and because He is God, um, there's just certain things. Obviously, all these characteristics in themselves belong to Christ. I mean, keep it simple. Wish the best for these people. That's why these situations come inside of your life. These things were very insightful, I know. Excuse me. But that was the overall premise, I'm tired of hearing it. I'm tired of hearing people get mad about, oh man, I'm mad at these witches also, brother. I mean, realistically, you need to just stop. I mean, I know you don't want to hear that, but it benefits you more if you genuinely wish the very best for them and you go to war with those devils. These witches don't have any power aside from any of these demonic entities that have, manifested in their body or have, made their bodies their homes. Uh, Other than that, they're regular old bobs from work. But if they don't have any of these demonic entities helping them out and aiding them out, they're useless for anyone and everyone. So all they could do is just sit in the little corner, just thinking about evil plans and not having any of the power to be able to fulfill or advance any of these plans themselves. So they're like completely, they're like harmless without their demons and their demon buddies. So you need to automatically war against their, demonic principalities and those things themselves, and still be wishing them the very best, that they actually do get saved, that they actually do get changed and reformed, and whatever ends up happening to them is on God's judgment, and there's not realistically anything that you could actually do about it. They're automatically going to die because God doesn't want them alive, and some of these individuals are going to, make it, and that's still entirely on God's judgment and on, whatever, there's not realistically anything that you can do about it. I can do anything about it, but these things are just set in stone. Oh well. Thank you for listening. So yeah, I'm gonna ask the Holy Ghost what else to break these curses up, to ensure that these individuals are actually delivered from these same old curses that have always affected them and plagued them, and to loose graces, virtues, healthy coping mechanisms, healthy wisdoms, and wise sayings inside of their vessel. To be able to retain those proverbs and proverbs themselves in their minds, their heart, their soul, their will, and their emotions, especially their emotions. I made mention of it in the past video, how people are just so susceptible to actually being manipulated and puppeteered by the devils that tempt them inside of their lives, because they're operating under the guise of these people not knowing what is actually happening. These individuals genuinely think that God is protecting them from anything and everything in their lives, that these devils are not actually able to come inside of their lives to actually be able to tempt them, but that is a flat out lie. So because of that, they completely drop their guards and they realistically don't hear or listen to their thoughts. And yeah, they're hearing the devil's thoughts and thinking that they're actually, thinking their thoughts. And all of it is just one big old puppet show and one big old manipulation scheme. Everybody's being puppeteered under the same exact principle, and yeah, everybody that you come into contact with that isn't saved, they're puppeteered by this principle itself. They think God is protecting them just because when they look out into the real world, they don't see a single demon. That's not what is happening in the spirit realm. What is happening in the spirit realm is these little devils are running frantically around every single person to be able to tempt them, to be able to get them to run you over, to be able to get them to murder you, to kill you, to be petty, to do petty things, to spit in your food. And this is just one big giant frantic mess for the devils. As you know, to them is just a mess. They don't want individuals knowing that, because then they lose that foothold inside of their lives, inside of your life, inside of my life, whose ever lives, right? They work the best in the dark. And if they're not actually able to convince you of this truth, then obviously everything is going full circle. Not full circle, full speed ahead, and they're just continuing, just advancing their own plans in your life, and they affect your kids. Your kids are born lame, your kids are born with cancer, your kids get cancer because you get tempted, your kids are molested, your kids are this and your kids are that, and or you're this and you're that. You end up in a hospital bed, you end up as a vegetable, all because of these stupid little devils that come inside of your life, and your stupid naivety to think that God's not going to hold you accountable for any of your actions. These things are that serious. This is essentially the reason why you're naive. You don't think that these situations can happen to you, and then next thing you know, they happen to you. So really think it through. Really think your actions through. Is it worth it? Obviously, no, right? These things are not worth it whatsoever for anyone. No matter how much you want to convince yourselves that they actually are, in the end, fire is hot and God is good. Yeah, I stuttered a lot in this video. I was like slurring my words. I tried to say heal, and then I said here, or whatever I did, the opposite. Try to say here, I said heal. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you apply these things to your life. Hopefully you're able to recognize and see for certain, your life is a mess because of you. Your mind is a mess because of you, because of your parents, because of your ancestors, because of Adam and Eve. You have to die. Break these curses up to, not have to suffer the consequences for these actions, or, just end up suffering for it. You had every means to not suffer for it, and yet here you are suffering for it. It's just so sad, Many individuals are just so limited by their own comprehension and logic that they're not actually able to, really better themselves and really get themselves out of the mire and out of the mud that they obviously put themselves in. They want to play the blame game. It's all your fault, and realistically, nobody put a gun to your head to actually commit these sins. And just cut it out, right? You're responsible. Reflect on your own life. Do whatever you want. And, stop putting God's name in your mouth for your actions. God doesn't sin. He doesn't, have to deal with any of those things themselves. And you just need to just mature, grow up. And, if you don't care about these consequences or any of these things themselves, and, just know that these things are going to get worse for you. But, life is not a free pass. You can't do whatever you want and then just whatever, you go to heaven. All these sins have to be atoned for. You have to pay for all of these sins themselves. So really consider that as there's some things happening inside of your life you don't feel you deserve it, right? But, you could think of a million types of actions that you've done in your life, and you automatically be like, okay, I do deserve it. You know what? It's fine. I'm sorry. I'll never ask again. I'll never do this again. I'll never ask for help again. So yeah, like I was mentioning in this video, all these things in themselves are just, these bits of knowledge are actually able to, let you know that there's a way out before these events and these situations actually end up happening. That's the whole purpose of this knowledge, is for you to prevent these situations from happening inside of your life. Now you're actually able to cope with these situations in a healthy manner, right? You're actually able to apply some of Christ's commandments to your life. You're able to perfect your character a little more. You're able to cope with these situations a little more, and you're not being affected or being held back by your own emotions to actually be able to obey Christ and do those types of things themselves. You're not being influenced by another person to actually be able to do the right thing in the right circumstances or in the wrong circumstances. You don't care about that. You're just like, well, whatever. I'm just here to please Christ. Either way, I'm not here to please man. And yeah, It's that simple. Now you're actually able to perfect your eternal character a lot more, right? I mean, you're not going to be falling for the same old traps that you always fell into, that you knew you were going to fall into. Now you know there's a way out. You know the severity of the situation, that these actions do come with consequences, and you know you're obviously going to have to suffer for these things and these petty actions, and whatever else you say and whatever else you do. God is going to hold you accountable for these sins, and unless you actually deliver yourselves from it, you're going to continue just suffering with God's judgment and the penalty for it in your life. So break these curses up, and now obviously I'm going to deliver you from them, and your ancestors' curses and your future kids' curses and all those things themselves. Pretty nice. Think ahead. All these things are avoidable in all honesty. But still, it was pretty nice of God to be able to show you that there's a way out of this. Instead of you just thinking, well, whatever, I just had to suffer with these consequences of my actions. You can break these curses that were going to affect your kids for sure, even if you don't have kids, or you do. That's one of the easiest things to get rid of, though. As well as the ancestral sins. The ones that are really difficult that I notice are the ones that you actually have committed. Well, the sins that you actually have committed in your lifetime. Your kids are another story, right? You could deliver all the suffrages that you're going to put your kids through, but you'll still have to suffer for those consequences. The generational sins and the curses of, from your family tree, you're going to have to suffer for some of those, like birth defects, and unless Christ gives you like something new, or a new leg or a new knee, or wish you could just ask for something new. Cancer are all these spiritual wounds, incurable wounds, incurable diseases caused by spiritual wounds. They keep giving you medicine for it, and in reality, it's a spiritual wound that has affected your soul. You need healing. It stinks. Your wounds actually stink because they go on untreated. Repent, move at Christ's pace. Bless your enemies, bless your watchers. Mature, grow up, grow in grace. And yeah. So earlier in this video, I obviously was mentioning on why you shouldn't be petty, the spirits behind these things, and what you actually notice in a person and the virtues that they obviously get paid for. You shouldn't be attracted at all by the carnal side of those things, but automatically the spiritual side of them. I mean, a person's looks, right? That's typically what people gravitate towards. That's not something that you should be focused on or centered in, but obviously you should be focused and centered on, just being paid for your own iniquities, and that you automatically need to gravitate towards the sanctity and holiness side of deliverance, and the reasons why you need to deliver yourselves. Just because it's a lot more, it's a lot deeper than you think. You're just like, well, these things in themselves are just like, well, I just need to deliver myself and I'll get pretty, and realistically it has nothing to do with that. It has everything. You're going to continue just adding more and more demons inside of your life. You really need to deliver yourselves, because you're getting holier, right? You're not doing the same old destructive habits of you thinking I'm ugly, or you thinking that I'm not good enough, and You obviously are not listening to the same old thoughts that the devils are constantly feeding you. You have a clear mind about these situations in your life, and so many other different things. And you're not being plagued. Your life is at peace. And you don't realistically have to deal with any of the types of suffrages that a person deals with on a regular basis. But automatically, all of these things in themselves work out for your benefit. Sadly, that's obviously my doing. Obviously, I'm standing these devils and these temptations to come inside of your life because I already know that these devils are stupid enough to take the bait. These people are definitely stupid enough to take the bait. And, God is obviously able to ensure that every one of these devils and every one of these temptations that come inside of your life are just meant for that specific purpose to be able to, bring their pride down to the floor and to just be able to help you out, right? To be able to get you to get that type of aid and that type of help that you need and you deserve. So for man, how do I say it? You need to humble yourselves down, or something along those lines. You need to, man, what's the word? You need to fear the Lord more. You need to do a little more work than you think you need to do. These things themselves have to deal with, the types of fruits that come with it. And, just thinking ahead and ensuring that everything that you actually have been learning, you are applying it to inside of your lives, because these are in short the means for you to actually be able to be delivered. Saying no to God's promises, no promises, saying yes to God's promises and saying no to sin and or no to any of these curses from affecting you, because no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Obviously, if you're cursed, they have every means to be able to prosper on you. But uh, if you're falling into sin, what do you think is going to happen? You think God is going to protect you because you're in sin? You're gonna have to suffer for that sin in a different form, and that's inevitable. In all honesty, I know it sucks, but you could get delivered from these things themselves if you would just stop listening to the voices of telling you can't, and realistically really try for yourselves and see if you really can't or not. I mean, that was the easiest means for me to actually be able to get delivered from certain situations that I thought I was hearing from God and from Christ himself, and in reality, I just had to push through and I had to push past those thoughts and really just deliver myself and just forget about it. Stop being so, gullible and naive, and think that some of these situations that come inside of my life are, you know, impossible to get over, when in reality, obviously, you have every means to be able to get over these suffrages if you would stop believing, the devil's tactics and lies of it's just not your time yet. In reality, you just tried it out to see if it was your time, and next thing you know, you got delivered. Or, you have to do this, you have to jump through hoops, and you have to do a backflip, or Christ isn't going to deliver you. Obviously, these things are more obvious for certain situations and certain circumstances, but for the most part, you need to try it out. You need to really see if it really is God or not, right? I mean, for the most part, you are going to get delivered. And for other situations, you're going to have to try a little more and try a little harder. But honestly, I'm convinced that anything and everything that is causing you to not be how you would be in heaven down here on earth, whether it's your heavenly image or your lifestyle, has to deal with the demonic and whatever the demons could actually convince you to believe. And if they actually end up convincing you that somehow your life is supposed to be this giant, enormous mess, and you can't live with your wife, and you have to be decrepit, and you have to do this, and you can't automatically just regenerate and regain your youth like that, and be rejuvenated like the king's hand that withered and then was brought back. Obviously there's plenty of miracles in the scriptures for you to actually be able to see, the miracles for you to actually be able to see that these things are very possible and very true. You can't be, limited to just, oh, well, what if these people, they say it's like, oh, obviously a lot of fear is going to enter these people's hearts, because you're going to see that, well, I remember this and I remember that, and now look at you, and I'm scared. You used to be lame, used to be deaf, used to be blind, and now look at you, you're able to hear, see, and you're able to walk. And Obviously, great fear is gonna, consume you because of these things themselves. But just forget about it. That's one of the means that the devils used to hold me back in towards spiritual warfare. It's just like, man, what if these people actually see it? I don't want to freak everybody out. But obviously, time passed, and now I realistically don't care about those things. I need to apply it to what I should and what I need to, because I can, and because I should. So yeah, thank you for talking. Oh, thank you for talking. Thank you for listening. I was gonna say thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I don't even know what that is, to be honest, but I just hear people say it. Uh, Witchcraft is witchcraft. What craft is witchcraft? In other words, not witchcraft is witchcraft. It's like witch, WHICH. Craft is witchcraft. It's the craftiness of lying. It's the craftiness of being able to deceive you. It's the craftiness of witchcraft. I don't know. It's the craftiness of being able to tempt you to fall into sin. That's what witchcraft is. Now, witchcraft is your demons are gone. Obviously, they're powerless, right? It's not witchcraft anymore. It's just a stupid person trying to convince you of their lies, of their obvious lies. Like, no, the sky is red. It's like, okay, dude. Thank you for listening. And fight. Engage yourselves in spiritual warfare. Hit the enemy where it hurts. Make them cry. Make them scream like a little girl. Oh, man. That's funny. You really have to, start to laugh at those things. Because it's worth it. And because he's, obviously puppeteering the whole earth. This is why I have so many problems. This is why the Ukraine is the way it is.